global shipping is severely disrupted by Houthi attacks on ships heading to the Suez Canal. But across the Atlantic, the other canal vital to international trade, the Panama Canal, is also suffering from major disruption.
The Panama Canal has been an important part of world trade for more than 100 years, making it easier for ships to move between the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. This time, though, it looks like it has some tough company. It is time for Mexico to step up with its own huge project, the interoceanic corridor of the Isthmus of Tehuantepec. What is this about, and how will it change the way people move by sea? Stay with us as we talk about Mexico's brave move, a $4-5 billion threat to the Panama Canal. That being said, we need to know a bit more about the Panama Canal and the Suez Canal before we can talk about the Mexican Marine Passage. Most likely, it is the most well-known man-made river in the world. In the middle, it goes through the Panama Isthmus. Since the word isthmus doesn't come up very often, we'll describe what it means. An isthmus is a narrow strip of land that joins two bigger pieces of land together. North and South America are connected by the Isthmus of Panama, which has the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans on either side. The width of the isthmus is about 65 kilometers. By the way, that's also how long the Panama Canal is, which is not very long. The Grand Canal of China is more than 20 times longer than the Suez Canal, which is almost 3 times farther. This is because the Panama Canal is very important, even though it is not very big. Before the Panama Canal was built in 1914, it was very hard for cargo ships to get from one side to the other. Moving things around was a real pain because to get things from Europe to California, you had to sail through Chile, go through the Strait of Magellan, and then sail back up north. This is such a boring process. It might only take a few weeks for a ship that was very fast to make the trip, but it would take most ships months, a few months. Also, it was very dangerous. There were always big storms and crazy currents in the Strait of Magellan, which made it dangerous to sail through. The Northwest Passage, which was the only other choice, was blocked by ice for most of the year, making it impossible for ships to get through. In 1902, the United States of America made the choice to do something about it. A plan was made to build a shipping canal in Central America. This new canal would not only make journeys safer, but it would also speed things up a lot. From the Atlantic to the Pacific would be only 12,000 kilometers farther away in less than a day if a ship could make the trip. That takes away a few good weeks of travel, but everything is easier said than done. In theory, this was perfect, but to build it was not an easy task. Laborers had to use dynamite, drills, and steam-powered shovels to clear more than 200 million cubic meters of earth. Just to put such numbers into perspective, if all the rubble were to be piled up in a great mountain fashion, it would be 80 times bigger in volume than the great edifices of the pyramids of Giza, and almost 2 times taller than the Empire State Building. All that rubble could have been basically a man-made mountain. As if unearthing the rubbles wasn't hard work enough, the laborers had to work under some extreme conditions. They found themselves working in temperatures of 40 degrees Celsius or more. The building of this canal also claimed the lives of workers. Almost 6,000 workers lost their lives, some due to heat stroke, but also due to rock slides and occasionally tropical diseases. The history of this canal is one stained with the blood of the innocents, and all in all, the building was not a fun experience. The work also faced some key engineering challenges. The planned canal's highest point was almost 30 meters higher than its lowest point. Because of this, the people who built the canal had to include a number of locks and gates that let them change the level of the water. With these locks in place, ships can go up to the 30-meter peak and then go back down. The United States spent a huge $375 million building this great canal. In today's money, that's $12 billion. Even though there were many problems during building, the Panama Canal was finally opened in August 1914, after more than 10 years of work. The first ship to cross the canal was the SS Ancon. This was a very important event in history. No matter what, man would keep changing and finding ways to make life a little better. The SS Ancon was the first ship to go through the canal. That year alone, more than 1,000 ships used it, and that number has only gone up since then. There are now over 10,000 ships that use the Panama Canal every year. They move 500,000 tons of goods. More substantial ships have to pay a toll to use the canal, which can reach $500,000. However, the money they save by not having to go around in circles, and the time they save by cutting their trips short by a couple of weeks, make it worthwhile. This canal changed the rules of global trade and has been the only major trade route since then. but as of 2024, it may not be able to keep its title as the major trade route as it faces tough competition. Yes, folks, let's talk about Mexico's passage between the oceans. What does the Interoceanico route in Mexico plan to do to compete with the Panama Canal? The Panama Canal has been number one for more than 100 years. How does it plan to take that spot back? Beyond the ocean tunnel, the Isthmus of Tehuantepec's path between the oceans. We need to go back to the 1800s to understand where this came from. That was around the time that the U.S. began to think about the Panama Canal. It turned out that they weren't the only ones thinking about this. In 1884, a strong man was elected president of Mexico. His full name was José de la Cruz Porfirio Díaz Mori, but for the purpose of convenience, we will refer to him as de la Cruz. De la Cruz hailed from Oaxaca, a state situated on the southern coast of Mexico. Upon assuming office, he made the strategic decision to construct a railway network linking the regions of Oaxaca and Veracruz, extending from the southern to the northern shore. Put simply, his objective was to construct a railway connecting the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans, with the aim of addressing the same problem that was resolved by the Panama Canal. Contrary to popular knowledge, in the middle of 1907, 7 years prior to the inauguration of the Grand Canal, the Tren Interoceanico, a new railway, was formally inaugurated. In the upcoming years, a large number of a substantial amount of merchandise was effectively transported along it. Mexico had a significant economic upturn as it assumed a more prominent position in global trade, resulting in a much-needed boost to its economy. However, this achievement was brief, and I assume we are already aware of the reason. After the Panama Canal opened in 1914, ships started using the Panama route instead and stopped using the Tren Interoceanico. In 1914, the volume of freight transported along the Mexican railway decreased by 33%, and a year later it plummeted by nearly 80%. Despite the fact that going along the train line in Mexico was faster than passing through the Panama Canal, the Tren Interoceanico was in closer proximity to the United States and offered a significant time-saving advantage over the Panama Canal. Therefore, it is puzzling why people would abandon the Tren Interoceanico in favor of the canal. These are the questions that were raised at that time. What might be the cause? There were several compelling justifications for this. Initially, a significant number of shipping corporations were based in the United States and showed a preference for endorsing an American initiative rather than a competing Mexican one. In addition, the Mexico-Americanil War had recently commenced, and the widespread bloodshed instilled fear in many nations, as they were concerned about the safety of their goods and citizens becoming inadvertently involved in the conflict. From a logical standpoint, it is more straightforward to utilize a shipping lane instead of dealing with the hassle of transferring freight onto trains. Due to a significant decline in traffic, the Tren Interoceanico became financially unsustainable. It succumbed to despair and remained in that state for more than a century until Mexico received another visionary leader, such as de la Cruz López Obrador. How does this innovative leader plan to transform the Tren Interoceanico? What is his strategy for reestablishing Mexico's position as a leading player in global trade? What plans are already underway? In 2018, President López Obrador of Mexico declared his plan to rejuvenate Mexico's previous railway system and create a novel pathway linking the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. This ambitious endeavor seeks to offer a modern substitute for the adjacent Panama Canal with an approximate cost of $4.5 billion. A few months later, the ambitious project was officially announced, detailing the plan for 3 key railway routes: Line Z, Line FA, and Line K. The work began rigorously in 2020, with the diligent clearance of vegetation, extraction of old rails, and installation of new ones that shine brightly. The length of the upcoming railway is expected to surpass 1,000 kilometers. The Mexican government aims to build a series of industrial parks next to the railway, in addition to its existing plans. López Obrador has unwavering determination and laser-like focus in his pursuit of achieving his objectives. In 2023, he utilized the military to take over a portion of outdated railway infrastructure that was lawfully owned by a private firm. Afterwards, he compensated the private business, guaranteeing that his government had full authority over the whole railway sector. He refrained from taking the risk of the approach failing due to a persistent private corporation. Each project is accompanied by its unique array of challenges, and this instance is no different. There have been several clashes with protesters, including multiple factions representing indigenous communities in Oaxaca. They are worried about the project's possible environmental consequences. Due to the railway development, construction workers are cutting down trees, which is causing damage to the nearby habitats. Reportedly, a group of protesters was arrested after they attacked construction workers with machetes. In some places, Native families have been forced to move without their consent. The diverse occurrences associated with the railway building have evoked a spectrum of sentiments among individuals, unequivocally making it a subject of contention. A substantial portion of the population maintains the viewpoint that the disadvantages of the projects outweigh the advantages, despite some arguments suggesting that the benefits outweigh the drawbacks. Experts predict that the restoration of the Tren Interoceanico will create job prospects for more than 500,000 individuals in the surrounding neighborhood. Moreover, it is anticipated to attract a significant influx of foreign investment, with an estimated value of over $50 billion. This has the capacity to completely transform the economy of the nation, which is exactly what President Lopez is expecting. Line Z was formally finished in August 2023. In September, Lopez Obrador personally embarked on a passenger train journey from the initial point to the ultimate destination. The entire journey lasted less than 9 hours, officially exceeding the pace of passage through the Panama Canal. Just a few days before Christmas, after 2 months, the trains were finally open to everyone and began taking people from the Atlantic coast to the Pacific. The other 2 lines might be finished by the end of 2024, which is good news. Even though a lot of progress has been made, the Tren Interoceanico needs a lot more work before it can be used for shipping between countries. As part of the project, the ports at both ends of the train lines will be completely redone to make them better for cargo ships. This includes building a huge seawall at the port of Salina Cruz out of hundreds of thousands of rocks to protect the harbor. These huge rocks are there to make it less likely that storms and waves will flip over cargo ships. In the past year, the area has had what you might call a rainfall deficit. As a result, shipping through the Panama Canal has slowed down, and the line of ships waiting in the bay to go through it has grown. People are now saying that things are going to get much worse. Experts say that limiting the Panama Canal could have effects all over the world. More than 14,000 ships went through the canal in 2022, carrying goods, minerals, fuel, and grain from companies in East Asia to people in New York and other places. The canal moves more than 40% of the things that are traded between Northeast Asia and the east coast of the United States. Some ships are up to 350 meters long. To get to Lake Gatun, which was man-made, they have to go through a tight waterway and climb more than 26 meters above sea level through a series of locks. The process is turned around on the other side of the canal, where ships go down to sea level through another set of locks before leaving the canal on the other side of the continent. For the locking system to work, it needs fresh water from Lake Gatun and another close lake. Around 200 million liters of water are used by every ship that goes through the canal. Most of this water runs out into the sea. More than half of Panama's 4.3 million people get their water from the same sources. This means that officials have to balance the needs of foreign shipping with those of the locals. There hasn't been a lot of trouble with this for decades. Because Panama is one of the wettest places in the world, the canal and the lakes that circle it have a lot of water. The water level in Lake Gatun fell in 2023, though, because of a lack of rain and the weather event El Niño. The canal and the people who live nearby use so much water that the lake is losing 3 billion liters of water every day. The water level in Lake Gatun is almost at its lowest point ever recorded during a rainy season. Because of this, the Panama Canal Authority, which runs the route, has had to limit the number of ships that can pass through. During normal times, 36 ships can pass through the Panama Canal every day. But because there is less water now, the Canal Authority has cut that number down to 22. It will only be 18 by February. Nitin Chopra, who used to be a tanker captain and is now a senior marine risk analyst at Allianz Commercial Asia, says that shipping has never been affected so badly. People who depend on the route have no good choices. They can either wait up to weeks to be able to go through the canal, pay up to $4 million to get ahead in line, or do what many shipping companies have had to do and avoid the route altogether, which adds days or weeks to their trip. All of these options cost traders a lot of money, and some have warned that because of the delay, Christmas shoppers on the east side of the U.S. may not be able to get some goods that are shipped from China. Many businesses avoid the Suez Canal because of attacks on the Red Sea, which is the world's busiest trade route. Restrictions at the Panama Canal will only make things more difficult for global supply lines at a time when governments all over the world are trying to control inflation. The Panama Canal Authority said that this estimate fits with its own and that it might think about putting more limits on ships. The authority says that even though it was in the middle of the rainy season, October was the driest since 1950, with 41% less rain than normal. The people in charge of the canal, global traders, and the millions of people who depend on Lake Gatun's supplies want to know if the current water shortage is just a one-time thing caused by El Niño or a sign of the worst things that climate change could bring. The authority says it couldn't have seen the crisis coming, but other people did. Climate change has been a worry for many years because it will have big impacts on global supply lines and the systems that control them. There are many amazing engineering feats in the modern world, like the Panama Canal. These structures sped up the economic boom of the 20th century, raised living standards around the world, and started a revolution in technology, healthcare, and consumer culture. There was an underlying idea that the wild world had been tamed, but those ideas are falling apart like dominoes as the seas rise and temperatures rise. The Panama Canal Authority, ACP, announced a major accomplishment for fiscal year 2023. This shows how important the canal is to protecting Panama's economy from both local and global problems. Even though the war between Russia and Ukraine and the drought caused by El Niño have put a strain on the economy, the canal has made contributions that have never been seen before. Even though it moved only 511.1 million PCUMS tons of goods in 2023, the Panama Canal made 14.9% more money, reaching $4.968 billion. The Rio Times says that this news came from officials on Thursday. Because of climate change, the river will not have enough water. It still thinks it will make 2.7% more in 2024. These facts were given by the Panama Canal Authority, ACP, for the time period from October 1st, 2022, to September 30th, 2023. Because of how it's built, the canal needs 208,000 cubic meters of water for every ship. Ships can move up and down with this water. In January 2023, a new toll plan began. It's going to end in 2025. The ACP thinks this plan will bring in more money. Still, water problems could make it harder to make money. Tolls could bring in 74.56% of the money in 2024. Other services might be able to add 23.21%. 1% could come from selling power, 7% from selling water, and 15% from other sources. Trips between the U.S. East Coast and Asia and between Europe and South America are important trade lines. There are 8,549 jobs at the canal. The head of the canal, Ricourt Vasquez, says that Panama and the canal both need more water. The ACP has looked into this for many years. The ACP says that the water area in the canal should be made bigger. The government and politicians need to do something about this. It will help 55% of people, businesses, and ships. The ACP has been in charge of this path between the seas since 1999. This began after the U.S. left, as agreed in a deal in 1977. Ferdinand de Lesseps set up the Suez Canal Company in 1858 so that the canal could be built. From 1859 to 1869, work on the canal was going on. The canal opened to the public on November 17, 1869. Using the Mediterranean Sea and the Red Sea, ships can go directly from the North Atlantic Ocean to the Northern Indian Ocean, skipping the South Atlantic and Southern Indian Oceans. This cuts the distance from the Arabian Sea to London by about 8,900 kilometers, or 5,500 miles, or 10 days at 20 knots, or 37 kilometers per hour, 23 miles per house, or 8 days at 24 knots, or 44 kilometers per hour, 28 miles per hour. The canal goes from the northern end of Port Said in the city of Suez to the southern end of Port Tawfiq. More than 20,600 ships went through the canal in 2021, an average of 56 per day. The first canal had a single-lane stream that went through the Great Bitter Lake and the Bala Bypass. According to Alois Negrelli's ideas, it didn't have any locks, so water could flow freely through it. The water in the canal north of the Bitter Lakes usually moves north in the winter and south in the summer. At Suez, the current changes with the tide south of the lakes. The Egyptian government owned the canal, but European investors, mostly French and British, owned the concessionary company that ran it until July 1956, when President Gamal Abdel Nasser took it over for the government. This caused the Suez Crisis in October and November 1956. The Suez Canal Authority, SCA, which is owned by the Egyptian government, runs and takes care of the canal. The Convention of Constantinople says that it can be used by any ship, whether it's in war or peace, and it doesn't matter what flag it has. As a naval route, the canal has still been an important part of defense strategy.